Ladies and gentlemen, come gather round, come gather round, come gather around. Today, we're talking about pressure pot sandblasters. Specifically, this pressure pot sandblaster, which is going to be the same as every other sandblaster you're going to find, just with somebody else's sticker on it. Whether it's a Harbor Freight, Princess Auto, KMS Tools, insert your favorite tool company here. This thing's a beauty. Let you in on a little secret. You're going to find a lot of negative reviews of this pressure pot sandblaster. It's really quite good. So I'll tell you why I like this. This thing puts out a crap load of sand. It does a really good job of cleaning paint and rust off of metal. And if you're restoring or modifying a vehicle and you don't want it to rust, the best way to get rid of the rust is to blast it. You can't really sand into the pits of the metal. You can't really scrape or wire brush into the pits of the metal. But this will blast into the pits of the metal. Then you can epoxy prime and it's going to be dandy. What do you need to make this thing work? You're going to need a compressor that puts out a fair amount of volume. I've been running this off of a 5-horse Ingersoll Rand 2-stage compressor. You can Google 2-stage versus 1-stage. My compressor will put out 14.5 CFM at, I don't remember the PSI. Experimenting with things, I was running this around 50 to 60 PSI and it was doing a pretty good job of that. These do come in a couple different sizes. This is the smaller of the two. I can't remember why I chose this one over the larger one. It was probably cost. But to be honest, I like this size. And here's why. A 50-pound bag of abrasive, one bag, fits in this blaster. Once you finish blasting, it takes about an hour to go through that 50-pound bag in here, which is a good time to take a break, if I'm honest. Then you can sweep up all that abrasive, and I usually sift it into a 20-liter pail, and a 50-pound bag of abrasive fits in a 20-liter pail. This is relatively easy to lift with 50 pounds in it, and then I just pour it back into the top, sifting it a second time, because why not? There's wet blasting that you can do, which is apparently nicer to the metal. I don't know, I'm cheap, and one bag lasts a long time. As I use more and more of the abrasive, it gets broken down and turns into dust, and the dust kind of sails away, and I just top this up and top it up and top it up. So I don't really even put a fresh bag in there, I just keep adding to it as it is depleted. It works. Modifications you might want to make to this blaster. Even if you have a compressor rated at 100% duty cycle, you're going to run a lot of air, and your compressor may not like that. And this thing comes with a dead man's lever that you squeeze it, it opens this and blasts all your abrasive out. I find that annoying to hang on to all the time, and as you let go to rest your hands or reposition yourself or the product, the compressor catches up, and then it's turning on and turning off more and more and more and more, and the compressor's not going to like that. I ended up changing to a ball valve right here. This isn't running, so I just flick it like this, and then the abrasive comes out, and I can just move this thing like a pencil, and it works decent. And then when I'm done, there you go. In theory, this isn't as safe, because if you keel over and have a heart attack and die, you want to be able to let go of the lever, and it shuts off. However, this is so much better. As long as you're paying attention that this is closed, when you hook up to air, you're going to be fine. You can get different tips for these. I found to make my compressor happier, I had to run a smaller tip. So this is like the smallest tip I can get for these blasters. I think it's a 2mm tip. That required me running a smaller abrasive, and I went to 30 to 60 grit crushed glass. I tend to use crushed glass. You could use other things. I used crushed glass. Over time, those tips are going to wear out. So assuming you can see these tips, this is old and busted, and this is new hotness right over here. They started out the same, but the abrasive starts to wear away the tip, and eventually it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and then your compressor can't feed this. So you got to change to a new tip. These aren't expensive. They're usually rubber because the dead man's valve closes that, but not in mine anymore. You're going to want a hood. Oh my gosh, are you going to want a hood? I've seen guys try to use these with like a face shield or safety glasses. Unless you're into hardcore exfoliation, you're going to want a hood. They come with a plastic screen inside that just pops out like so. The screens are 12 or 13 bucks at Princess Auto. They don't last forever. You're probably going to go through like one a session unless you're really good at not having any of the abrasive blast back into your face. I imagine you could probably just buy a sheet of Lexan and then cut these up to the size you need. I haven't got around to that, but it might be cheaper to do so. But you're going to want these. At the back of the blaster, you've got this crazy apparatus here. This is connecting to the air line to your shop. And once you plug the air line on, you flick this lever and compressed air will go into here. In theory, the water comes out. This thing might need a little bit of a snugging up. This separates the water. You don't want to have any water going through your abrasive. I run 2 of these. One of these is at the outlet on the wall, and then this one right here. Comes into here, pressurized air goes into the container and pushes down on the top of the sand, but it also tees off and goes down here through this hose under the machine. When you are finished, you flick this up, down, you flick this down, shuts off the air feeding all of this, and it opens a little bleeder on the backside and it starts draining off all the air that's inside. So you'll hear it hissing out the air as it bleeds off, and then you'll hear the lid kind of collapse inside. Once this thing bleeds off all the air, you can put more sand in it, or abrasive. Don't use sand. This does not come with a blaster, but as I was learning this machine, I had to screw with some of the fittings, so I just kept this here so I could take it apart and mess with it some more. I've been running about 50 PSI on this and it's doing pretty good. You can run more PSI. I did try for some really rusty metal to run 100 PSI, but it ended up going through more air and working the compressor too hard. At the bottom of the blaster, I made a little bit of a change. It came with this crazy device where pressurized air would go into here, it would pick up the sand and head off through the hose. But inside, this just didn't really look like it flowed all that well. I was running into some issues with this thing stopping, like clogging up. So I changed it to this device, which is just basically a pipe T. The tank feeds into this, compressed air goes into here, and that goes off to the nozzle. So far, I've been pretty happy with this, but I've also played around with the settings of this thing, and I'm not sure I needed to change this. On the other hand, it might be an idea to upgrade this to something bigger to have it plug up less. Let's talk about plugging things up. How I set up this machine for the best success is like this. I have this lever full on, so I get full air pressure going to the nozzle. Full air pressure is going to go under the tank, pick up the sand, and blast it out through here. You probably saw under the tank is this lever. This lever adjusts how much of the abrasive is being brought into the airstream. This is finicky, and you probably need to screw with it depending on what kind of abrasive you put through it. Roughly half open is going to be good for you. You'll need to find a balance between having too much abrasive, which just means you're done sooner and you got to sweep up sooner, or not enough abrasive, which would be too much air and it drains your tank. I found I want to run just enough abrasive that it's not kind of not even spitting, but it's sort of got a little bit of a pulsation to the feed. I want to add abrasive until it gets past that, and then it actually clogs up less if I get to that point. So this, you got to play with this. It'll be roughly half full. Once you have this set full and the valve on the bottom set halfway, when you're ready to do the blasting, just put this valve on full, or if you've got the dead man's valve, squeeze that on and make sure this is unobstructed entirely. I strongly recommend putting a ball valve in here. That has been a godsend. Then just spray. At some point, you may find the abrasive flow reducing and reducing and reducing and reducing. If you're not running out of abrasive, it could be the valve down at the bottom is starting to clog. If it's starting to clog, you don't get as much abrasive. So to unclog it, the most effective I found is I shut this off completely. So no air is going through here, and the compressed air is pushing only the sand out the bottom. And it will all come out of here like a big, huge pea stream of abrasive puking out of there. Once it's puking out, you've probably unclogged it. Flick this thing back to full open, and you'll be back in business in a few seconds once the rest of the sand comes out. Keep a piece of like 16 gauge wire in your pocket. And so I just keep this in my breast pocket, and sometimes the tip is going to plug up with something, and you'll know, it just kind of stops and it barely hisses. So I can take this little wire, stick it in the hole, and pop it out, and that'll usually break free whatever's plugged up the tip. If you didn't do a good job of sifting the abrasive before you put it in, you're going to get stuff plugged in here. If your abrasive is too big, it may not come out of here as well. So this has been handy. It's annoying when it plugs, but just a quick little shovity zippity doodah, and it's good to go for a while. So when I was shopping for these, there's old school style that has like a threaded cap to plug the whole thing, and then you got this style that's like a bowl with a crazy T-handle in the bottom and a bit of a gasket, and I thought, I don't like this. It just doesn't seem to seal that well to me. Till I bought it and ran it, and this is actually pretty idiot proof. It's a decent way to go for sure. So this thing is full right now. You can see the abrasive down in the bottom. So it's probably fuller than it should be. It happens. So what you would do when you got the compressed air hooked up to this guy, you just pull this up, kind of center it, and just pull with your hands. And then I turn on the valve. Let's move this hose so you can see. Then I turn on the valve here, and compressed air goes inside, and while it's pushing down on the sand, it's also pushing up on this. And if this is like, I don't know, 9 square inches, at 100 psi, you have 900 pounds of force pushing this up. It'll stay. It's gonna stay. And when you're impatient and you're trying to drain this and you flick this thing down, it's bleeding off all the pressurized air in here, and you're impatient, you want to fill this up, and you push this to crack the seal, don't do that. You're going to get sand in your face. That's not cool. Well, it's cool to watch, but not to be there. In the midst of fixing up my 61 Chevy Apache, check the links up here, I was quoted upwards of $1,800 Canadian to blast everything on the body, the box, the cab, the frame, inside, outside, everything. Be upwards of $1,800 to do it. This, I believe I paid like $140. It's definitely saved me a ton of money in using it. It definitely takes for freaking ever. If you ever have the desire to remove all of the paint from your entire vehicle using nothing but the end of a pencil eraser, that's about how fast this thing works. However, if you don't mind getting lost in your mind and thinking about songs you sang in kindergarten while mindlessly blasting off paint, this is pretty decent. I have no complaints about it. I'm very happy that I bought it. It took me a little bit of figuring out how to make this thing work the best. Tried to share that with you so you don't have any hassles with it, but I like this and it's worked really well. I'm not sponsored by these guys, though it wouldn't hurt to be sponsored by them. And got a video coming up in the next couple days, The Amazing World of Blasting. Check it out. I'll probably put a link here once I make it. Thanks for watching. I hope that's everything. I don't remember.